bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So we will start with first with patana, with the next condition, with the ramman apaccayo, the object condition. And halfway through, maybe I'll stop and I'll turn to the questions that people have raised during this week, and we can discuss them. We can discuss, or I can explain how I see it, or you can contribute also. So, okay, so the first 20 minutes we'll talk about the object condition. So we have finished the root condition, and the next way how dhammas, how things can relate to each other, is called aramana condition or object condition. Okay, so in Theravada Abhidhamma, every consciousness has to have an object. There is no consciousness. Consciousness cannot arise if there is no object. So in that way, object conditions the consciousness to arise. When there is object, consciousness can arise. Of course, there are more conditions needed for consciousness to arise, but one of them is an object. And this relationship between an object and condition that knows that object, and consciousness that knows that object, we call object condition. And there are 6 kinds of objects. You probably know: the color, sound, smell, taste, and tangible object, and mental object. And they condition the respective consciousnesses. That is the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, the body consciousness, and the mind consciousness. Okay, so an aramana means a support, and the commentary, the commentary of Patana gives this image, this comparison to a rope or stuff that helps a handicapped person to walk. So it supports the consciousness. The consciousness kind of rests itself on an object. Okay, so first we will look at the text, and then I'll try to explain one by one. So first of all, we look how wholesome state can be related to a wholesome state by object condition. And the text begins just by statement that yes, wholesome state is related to wholesome state by object condition. And then we have an explanation, elaboration. So Dhanam datva silam samadhitva uposathakamam katavatam pachavekati. That means after having offered the offering, having undertaken the precept, having fulfilled the duty of observance, one reviews it. Or pubesujnani pachavekati, one reviews formally well done actions. Jhana buddhahitva jhana pachavekati. Having emerged from jhana, one reviews the jhana. Seka gotramugam pachavekati vodunam pachavekati. Learners review change of lineage, they review purification. And seka maga buddhahitva magam pachavekati. Learners having emerged from path review the path. Okay, so maybe some or many words are unknown, never mind. But the main thing, what you can see here, is when the mind reviews a previously done wholesome action. So not even wholesome action, but wholesome states that were arising that were arising previously. When one reviews these wholesome states, the consciousness is also wholesome. So the first one, after having offered an offering, so dhanam datva, silam samadhitva, having undertaken the precept, uposathakamam. It's a funny translation. I took this translation from Venerable Narada, the Patana Sayadaw, Mula Patana Sayadaw. I don't know if you know what is uposatha, but I think probably you know. So the 4 times a month there is a day that is called uposatha. on the full moon, new moon, and the 8th day between them. And on that day, usually in Buddhist countries, a lay follower will come to monastery and make dana and undertake 8 precepts, maybe meditate, listen Dhamma talk. So it's a religious day, and this kind of activity on the Uposatha day is called Uposatha Kama. So when one reviews that he's done that, wholesome consciousness arises. And here, so these are just specific examples, and here this statement states basically it's the same but more general. One reviews formally well done actions, so the before done wholesome actions. So this moment, I would like to take a look at the mental process in the sensual sphere, at the mind door. So in our normal everyday life, when a mental process occurs, this is how it occurs. So we have bhavanga, and we have the mind door adverting consciousness, and we have the consciousness that experiences an object, and then there may be a retentive consciousness or tadaramana, and then bhavanga. Okay, so what is this bhavanga? We say that there is, throughout the life, there is consciousness, but just now in the beginning, I was saying that there is no consciousness that doesn't have any object. So every consciousness will have an object. So, okay, so Javana is experiencing this consciousness, this red consciousness is experiencing an object that appeared, that came in contact with the mind door. And so we have 6 sense doors, and objects constantly bombarding us, and the mind knowing that objects arises. But between these processes, or the time when there is no external object coming in, there is still consciousness, and that consciousness we call bhavanga, and it will be throughout one's life. This will be of the same type, consciousness, resultant consciousness of the same type, from the rebirth to the death, and it will have the same object. Okay, so this is a very simple process, and it occurs many uncountable times during a day or even a moment, really. So constant knowing of objects. And now, so when one performs, when one does some kusala, when we have a wholesome javana, so one does, and say offering, okay, so, or one observes his precepts, in the sense, say one refrains from lying or from killing or whatever. So whatever wholesome action one does, the wholesome javana arises, the wholesome consciousness arises. So okay, so now that's in the past. Now, when one is reviewing that, when one is thinking about that previously done action, so and what one is reviewing, okay, so one is not reviewing that, I have done an action. That's not what is meant here. So what one is reviewing is the state of mind that was then while performing that action, that wholesome states that were arising. Say one was happily helping someone, giving a hand, no? So when one remembers that, and not by the way of remembering, I have done this or that, but by the way of remembering how it felt, what kind, thinking, reflecting on what kind of state it was. So at that time, the object of consciousness arising at that time is wholesome. So you have wholesome consciousness, which takes a wholesome object. And why is it important to do that? It is really important and helpful to do that, because this helps to develop wisdom. this helps the mind to become familiar and to see what does it mean to do wholesome, what kind of states arise at the time. And when the mind knows these pure states, when it sees that, wow, that's really pure, that's really good, these kind of states, then one will be, the mind will be more and more inclining to do that again and again, rather than going into unwholesome side, just enjoying the essential pleasures, well, just, I don't know, eating, very nice, but rather thinking like, because rather inclining to actually doing something good and experiencing another kind of happiness than we get from sensual enjoyment. So that's what this statement means. After having offered the offering, after undertaking the precept, and having fulfilled the uposatha, observance, one reviews it. And so reviews means that is a conditioned state, this consciousness that is reviewing, and it, whatever wholesome states that arose previously while doing these actions. Okay, reviews formally well done actions. Same. And as I said, it doesn't mean that one is thinking, oh, I have done this and that, oh, how good I am. Because thinking I have done is actually thinking not in accordance with the Dhamma. Because in accordance with the Dhamma, there is no I who has done. Only the actions, only the doing. So it is better to reflect. You can reflect on the action, or you can see the actual states that were arising at the time. Okay, so the next three here refer to the processes of attainment of jhana and attainment of the Maggaphala, on the path and fruition knowledge. And so I will explain the terms. No, what means sekha here? So sekha is it's translated learner here. Learner sounds a little bit someone who is still learning. Well, yes, true, but actually that refers already to a noble person who is not yet an arahant. So anybody Sotapanna, Sakatagami, Anagami is called sekha, is a learner. He's in the process of learning to become aseka. Aseka is arahant, so he's beyond learning already. So when learners review the change of lineage and review purification, and when learners emerge from path and they review the path. Okay, so we can see these things in details in here. I will try not to go too much into detail of how things happen. I think it might be not too important, but what the color coding that I have here is according to resultant consciousness is blue. The green is just functional consciousness. And this red, a wholesome consciousness, and again blue is resultant consciousness. And same everywhere. So for the jhana, it's quite simple. Is just like we have seen in the essential sphere process. We have bhavangas, manodvara vajana, that is the mind turns to the object, to our jhana object. And first there may be preparation consciousness, there may be access consciousness, there may be conformity, and gotrabhu. So these first 3 or 4 consciousness they are still sensual sphere consciousness, and the next consciousness is actually jhana consciousness. And then return to bhavanga. This is the first time. And then subsequently, the jhana consciousness can occur many times. There is no limit really, or no count how many times it occurs, so for a long time. Unlike the essential, the process of the mind process in the essential realm, where we have jhana, the experience of object, just only 7 mind moments, and then back to bhavanga. So here the process will be continuous and uninterrupted for a longer time. Okay, so these are wholesome. And when one is reviewing the jhana, what does it mean? So we had the statement, one reviews the jhana. It means that one is reviewing the jhana factors. So at least according to the commentary explanation, it means that one is reviewing so having emerged from jhana, one looks back, okay, so again, in a similar way how one looked back at what kind of states were arising when I was doing that kusala, he looks at, okay, what kind of states were arising at the time of jhana, and especially jhana factors. So the 5 jhana factors, like the initial application, sustained application, joy, happiness, and one-pointedness for the first jhana, and less for higher jhanas. So that means one reviews the jhana factors. So here, I think I will not go further. I think it may be quite a lot of information for somebody who is not familiar with this from before. So maybe I will stop here and I will turn to the questions. And I will turn to the questions about an arahant. I think it's very good questions, actually. And I will read first. And Anna wrote that she understood that indeterminate as something which does not produce karma, rather than being something indeterminate between ku and aku, rather than indeterminate as not having a clear result, as she had thought before. We tend to think of kusala as something to aim for and akusala as something to come out of, but the actual liberation is related to Bhyan, she asks. I got this when Bhya mentioned about the action taken by an arahant, which do not create further karma and are merely functional. Okay, so, and then Marieke has added that she understands that arahant do perform wholesome actions, but that in their case, they don't produce any karma. And yeah, so she wanted to understand more. All right, so one comment, this is a comment regarding the terms, the usage of terms. So when we say wholesome, that means it brings good result. So to say that arahant performed wholesome action, well, it's not correct. He performs actions like wholesome actions, but not exactly wholesome. We don't call them wholesome, we call them functional, because they don't bring results. Yes, so I think you understood correctly. This is the difference. And why I like the question, because I think this is a common confusion. And I have heard before, like many years back, I remember like people speculating or thinking, oh, we shouldn't do no good, no bad. And to liberate. So the freedom is when you go beyond doing good and bad. But well, we have to define what is good and what is bad. This is one thing, but put it aside. In at least in Theravada Buddhist teaching, what we have a step-by-step progress going. So it's correct, going first to kusala. So in order to eradicate akusala, and once by the means of that kusala, the akusala is totally eradicated, so one becomes an arahant. So the way is not through the kirya, not through indeterminate, not through functional consciousness. The way is actually through wholesome consciousness. So how does it that Arahant does actions but doesn't get but these actions do not get the result? For that, it's really enough to look at the Paticca Samuppada. So you may be familiar with the Paticca Samuppada, no? And in simple way, in how it works, in simple words, we can say that because of not knowing, because of ignorance, because of not knowing, one acts. These are actions, our volitional actions. Okay, because of acting, because of doing, one experiences, one feels. And because one is experiencing, one wants, craving, or he wants to have, or he doesn't want to have, which is same, so one wants. And because one wants, one gets. So he gets all this dukkha kanda, jati jara marana, sokparideva dukkha dominus vayasa. Yes, so for Arahant, we're not saying he's not doing, he is doing. We are not saying he's not experiencing, he is experiencing. But he doesn't have avidya, he doesn't have ignorance. And he doesn't have craving. So without this, without ignorance, without craving, there is no becoming, there is no getting. So this is in simple lay terms. In a more, say, technical approach, we can say that the kusala brings wholesome result. Okay, so but whenever we perform any action, we are not arahants. When not an arahant performs any action, it is bounded by ignorance. It is bounded by mental processes which are about I am doing, oh, this is mine. So to support that statement, I want to cite you a sutta where one monk named Khemaka is explaining to other Theras how he understands, how he experiences. He is an anagami, he is not arahant. And the Theras, they initially thought he's an arahant. And so Khemaka is explaining them why he's not an arahant and where is the difference. And he explains them. So friends, even though a noble disciple has abandoned the 5 lower fetters, that means anagami, still in relation to 5 aggregates subject to clinging, there lingers in him a residual conceit. I am, a desire, I am, an underlying tendency, I am, that has not been uprooted. And this is actually the cause for becoming. And this is the cause for getting results. This is what makes an action wholesome or unwholesome, this conceit. So, of course, it's difficult to, at least for me, to imagine, but I would think if I'm not an arahant, so if in one's continuum, there is no more this kind of feeling, this kind of this is not even a thinking, this is just a tendency, you see, like a residual conceit, desire, underlying tendency, I am, if it's not there anymore at all. So perhaps the volition behind the action is not same as when, say, we are doing kusala. But the actions in themselves, same. Let's say the Buddha has maybe you know quite a famous story One time he came to a sick ward, and there was a bhikkhu with a nobody was attending to him. He was very fully smelling and all. Don't remember what disease. Very bad, but nobody cared because smelling so bad. So, and Buddha and Ananda, they washed him, they changed his clothes, they took care. So this is a wholesome action, and you would do. You would see. I'm sure you would do also. And so the action in the same itself is same action, but the volition beyond might be not same. So, but for me, it's difficult to say I'm not an arahant. And just to say a little bit more about this, I have another sutta. This is, sorry, it doesn't fit for some reason. Sariputta Sutta from Anguttara Nikaya. Okay, when Sariputta, a bhikkhu, has no I-making, mind-making, and underlying tendency to conceit in regard to this conscious body, when he has no I-making, mind-making, and underlying tendency to conceit in regard to all external objects, and when he enters and dwells in that liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, through which there is no more I-making, mind-making, and underlying tendency to conceit, or one who enters and dwells in it, he is called a bhikkhu who has cut off craving, stripped off the fetter, and by completely breaking through conceit, has made an end of suffering. That is, he is an arahant. And you see, there is this no I-making, mind-making, underlying tendency to conceit, this same as here. You see, the residual conceit, I am, desire, I am, underlying tendency, I am. Same thing. So my main message and my main understanding, arahant still, he does what we call good deeds, or what we would call good actions. But when they do, or say beautiful things, beautiful actions, but when he does, the volition may be not exactly the same as when we do, and thus it doesn't bring the result, because in his continuum there is, in these actions are not surrounded by ignorance and craving, and it cannot bring any future results. So that's one question. If you have any comments or questions or whatever, welcome. And another question is quite easy. I think this is quite basic. Abhidhamma. Okay. So Pia mentioned that adosa and aloba can be with or without amoha. Does this mean that one might be performing a wholesome mental, vocal, or physical action while not being aware that it will create wholesome karma? So, accompanied by ignorance without amoha. And there is also the possibility of being aware that it will create wholesome karma accompanied by amoha, lack of ignorance. So, consciously performing an action which will bring a wholesome fruit. Yes, sure. That's exactly what it means. When we were talking about the 8 type of consciousness, wholesome sense sphere consciousness, great wholesome consciousness, we talked about it being divided according to different factors. So depending on feeling, depending on being prompted and unprompted, and depending on being associated with wisdom or not being associated with wisdom. So yes, the wholesome, you still can do wholesome action, the action that is blameless, faultless, and that will bring good result, but without wisdom, without even knowing that. And then simple example which we have in Visuddhimagga and other commentaries or Abhidhamma text is an example of a child being who is just doing what their parents do. So if parents do wholesome action, a child may not know this is good, this is bad, karma, whatever. It doesn't know. He just do whatever like a parrot. He's just mimicking, emulating the action of his parents. So he may do, he may give something, like I don't know. You don't even need a Buddhist society where we do see a lot how parents tell their children, oh, here, offer, or gado, pay respect, sadhu, 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 do like this. And child does, and everybody's so pleased and so happy. And the child is, of course, happy. Still, it's a good action for a child, but there is no wisdom. But even in the West, I mean, you have friends around and you give something to a child, or a child takes something and gives to your friend. So that's wholesome action. But child may not know anything. It's good, bad, it's karma. So that's the classical example for this kind of consciousness. And one can be, it can be done happily, it can be done with neutral mind, and it can be done being encouraged by someone, and it can be done just spontaneously. So like this, we have 4 kinds of consciousness without wisdom. And with wisdom, obviously, you know what you're doing. You know that what you're doing is good, and it will bring good results. So this is wisdom, and that doesn't need much explanation. The difference is, which Paoksaidor emphasizes a lot. He emphasizes the importance of, for us, to have wisdom, to do our wholesome actions with wisdom, because the result that this consciousness give is different. So if the consciousness, wholesome consciousness, is not associated with wisdom, when it will give result, if it is strong enough and if it's ripe to give a result as a rebirth in the next life, then the bhavanga, the base consciousness, will be dissociated from wisdom, because that wholesome action was not associated with wisdom. And if it doesn't have wisdom in bhavanga, if there is no wisdom, then one cannot, however much he practices, he cannot attain anything. He can practice, he can develop the mind, but he will not attain any higher states like jhana or path or fruition. That's the explanation given in Abhidhamma. True or not? Okay, so, but if the consciousness, the wholesome consciousness, is associated with wisdom, it will depend also on the quality of that wholesome consciousness. If it's strong and powerful, then the result will be associated with wisdom too. But if it's not, if it's weak, it's minor, it's omaka in Pali, it's not very good, even it's with wisdom, the result will be devoid of wisdom. So the result in consciousness as a patisandhi, as a rebirth consciousness. And then, so it becomes quite an important thing for us if we want to attain liberation in this very life. So it's important. And many people, they want to know, they're so curious. Oh, and they start to worry so much. Oh, do I have wisdom in my bhavanga? Oh, I don't have. Can I attain anything? Or I cannot attain. And even during the conference, when I went, just when was that, last week before last, the Abhidhamma conference in Tamji, So there was one man who had exactly the same question. And in the end of all presentations, there was a time for questions and answers where all those who presented could answer the questions. And this question was taken by Venerable Urevata. So what he said is, even it's very difficult actually to decide. Only you can find out for yourself if there is wisdom in your Bhavanga or not. He said that sometimes somebody can be smart, can be very clever. He read a lot. He has so much information, but his Patisandhi, his Bhavanga doesn't have wisdom. So it doesn't depend on our cleverness. But Bante said, if whenever you encounter a new situation, a new challenge, and something you haven't done before, and you have a problem and you have to solve it, and you can solve it quickly, then most likely you have wisdom in you, because this is practical. It can arise on the spot, so you have enough support to solve things yourself without a support of what have been heard before. And then Sayadaw said, well, you should practice step by step, and he went into explanations of all. So how you practice anapana, and then you attain first jhana, and then, well, if you have attained first jhana, then, well, you should know, yes, you have wisdom in your Patisandhi. So this is to the question that yes, wisdom can be but not necessarily in your kusala, and it's important. So please, whenever you do wholesome action, try to remember what is good and what is the cause, what is result, and have wisdom with you. So less than a minute remaining, and that's all then.